Okay, Ransom Reviews back with another tier list, this time taking a look at the 25 fiction books I read in 2019. And they're all going to be ranked on this beautiful Final Fantasy VII Remake themed tier list because I'm playing the game right now on a nostalgia trip from 1997. In the S tier category is the soundtrack, which is just gorgeous and perfect and beautiful and really brings me back to my childhood. In the A category, we have the adding of extra ridiculous sexual tension. Everybody wants to bang Cloud, it seems like, in this game, and it's funny and makes me giggle like a teenage schoolgirl. In the B category, we have beautiful characters and graphics. The game looks great, especially the main cast of characters. In the C category, we have combat. Obviously, the combat is divisive. It's completely different than it was in the original, but it's 22 years later, 23 years later, you probably had to change it. In the D category, we have dedicating the entire first game to Midgar. In the first game, this was about a 5 or a 10-hour section of the game, and in this one, it's the entire game, and it's really confusing to me why they chose to do that, and it really kind of drags on in places. And in the worst category, E, is the episodic nature of Final Fantasy VII. I have no idea how many installments it's going to be. I have no idea what the quality of those installments are going to be. I have no idea if it's going to finish in my lifetime or if at all. So that's obviously very worrying. So now that I've explained this weird ranking system to you, let's get started. At 25, we have River God by Wilbur Smith. This only made the top 25 list because I read exactly 25 fiction books last year. I love historical fiction. It's one of my favorite genres, and I also find Egyptian history fascinating. So this should have been a home run for me. And yeah, it was a home run. A home run that landed on the head of an old lady in the stands, killing her on impact, which in turn made her daughter commit suicide out of grief, which in turn led her daughter to drugs. God, this book was miserable. It's told through the voice of a powerful administrator who just happens to be the Gary Stewist of Gary Stews. He's great at maths, architecture, medicine, cooking, thinking, life, romance, one-handed push-ups, dog grooming. What a cunt this narrator was. I disliked this book so much, I doubt I'll ever read Wilbur Smith again. Yes, very strong feelings. At 24 is The Remains of the Day, which is actually a book I have reviewed on this channel already. So yeah, The Remains of the Day. I'll keep it brief. As I said, it's on this channel already. It's a really well-written book. The author is obviously a very, very good writer, but it's about a boring subject told by a boring narrator. I blame myself for even choosing this book. Honestly, what possessed me to select a book that's about the nostalgia of an English butler? At 23 is Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut. I can't believe I'm rating a Kurt Vonnegut book this low. Shame on me. That being said, probably my least favorite Vonnegut book that I've read so far, and I've read quite a few. His writing is usually doing cartwheels through my soul. He's probably my favorite author, so I suppose it's a bit shocking that this one disagreed with me so much. Usually Vonnegut finds a way to be depressing, profound, hilarious, and ridiculous simultaneously. Unfortunately for me, Mother Night only gave me the depressing vibe. At 22, the last book in the shittiest of all categories is I, Claudius by Robert Graves. Some people are probably really upset with me right now. It's a very well-regarded book. Not for me. Okay. So, I, Claudius, another misadventure in historical fiction for me. Another immensely talented writer, but this book irked me in a lot of ways. The entire book is a farce, and I guess I'm too dense to even realize what the point was. So here's a summary of the book: politics, poison, kill, politics, kill, poison. I suppose if you're a duplicitous, murderous politician having a break from reality, then this book is right up your alley. Moving into the D category at 21 is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. So, Gaiman is another highly celebrated author that I've had a difficult time really appreciating, and I can't explain why. I've read a few of his books now, and I just find I'm ambivalent about them. They're fine, readable, enjoyable, and forgettable. At 20 is The Tattooist of Auschwitz. I'm a sucker for anything World War II related. It's one of the most fascinating periods of history for me. Every once in a while, you just want to read a book that makes you both ashamed and amazed at the brutality and resilience of humans, and then have a good cry. And this book certainly ticks those boxes. At number 19 is The Outsider by Stephen King. Stephen King, who was my neighbor growing up. Not that we spent a lot of time together, but I haven't read his books in a long time, and I've probably read more King books than any other author. So it was interesting to touch back with King with one of his more modern works, and yeah, same old King. Excellent characters and dialogue, and the plot for the first three quarters of the book is completely riveting, and then there's kind of a weak ending. I always thought Stephen King had a real difficult time ending his books, and I had the same issue with this one, but still a fun read. At number 18 is 1984 by George Orwell, a classic, which doesn't do much to influence me. So I often come across books that I admire the hell out of, and I appreciate how important they were and still are, but I don't particularly enjoy reading them. William Gibson's Neuromancer springs to mind. So does Orwell's 1984. It is a seminal achievement and certainly deserves more than my banal Twitter post reaction. I have read it twice now, and I think of it often as it's easy to draw comparisons between the nightmarish world he wrote about and our current environment. But I just don't enjoy reading this book. It hurts my soul, it makes me feel sad and dirty, and ultimately I do read for enjoyment, so that's why it ranks so low for me. Moving into the C category, at 17, we have A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini. So this is another book that I've reviewed on this channel, so if you want to know more about it, you can check it out there. Very briefly, I'll just say this is a well-written book about an area of the world I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, so in that way, it was illuminative. I did feel it was a bit emotionally manipulative at times, but still an enjoyable, moving, well-written book. At 16 and 15 are the final two books in the Alexandros trilogy. Doesn't really matter which order they go in, as I found the quality of both of them to be pretty similar. So the Sands of Ammon and the Ends of the Earth. I can't say that I loved this trilogy. In fact, I found most aspects of it to be pretty average. I've reviewed all three on my channel, so again, you can check those out if you're interested. What really propels these books for me is the subject matter. Alexander the Great is undeniably fascinating, a singular force, and a real-life example of mythology. And if you're interested in his life or his history, his story, you almost need to find a book that tells his story. This is one of your choices. It's one of the better reviewed choices out there. I haven't read any other ones to comment on that, but this one does scratch that itch. At 14 is Mythos by Stephen Fry. So almost staying in the same area of the world here. This is a modern retelling of Greek mythology. And so many of my book choices are informed by my personal interests. I've always loved Greek mythology growing up, and I'll still read just about anything on the topic. Mythos was a fun and disturbing retelling of some of the classic Greek myths. The modern veneer applied reminded me of what would happen if you gave a group of unruly teenagers godlike powers. The Greek gods truly were horny, vindictive, sneaky, violent, jealous, vain, and immature bastards, which makes for great reading. At number 13 is another reread of an old classic, Animal Farm by George Orwell. So, yes, this was the second time I read this book as well. It's well known this entire book is an allegory for communist Russia, but I don't think you even need to know that or have knowledge of that particular history to enjoy this book. Even as an oblivious teenager, I enjoyed this book as it's short, snappy, cute, dark, and clever. The simple themes of power corrupting and how attempting to create a utopia can easily lead to a dystopia are timeless and still well read today. At number 12, I have Siddhartha. Moving up into the B category. So I really struggle with most literature. So I was pleased to finally find one I could not only respect, but enjoy reading in the moment as well. I am not a spiritual person, but I found Siddhartha's journey compelling. What is the meaning of life? And can enlightenment be achieved through asceticism, excess, or spirituality guiding others? Ultimately, Siddhartha realizes that enlightenment only comes from within. Despite his journey and process having almost nothing in common with my own, I found it so relatable how his search for meaning in life took him through these different extremes and how he was able to learn from each experience. I highly recommend reading this book if you haven't. At number 11, also in the B category, is Circe. Mm-hmm. Now, I actually moved this book to my top 10 fantasy list, but it's back on the fiction list as well because without it, we have 24 books. And who wants a fucking top 24 list? How lame is that? So, yeah, Circe, you're doing double duty. If you enjoy beautiful prose and Greek mythology, you need to read this book. It's gorgeous. Okay, so top 10 time. In order to commemorate making it this far, I've released a TikTok top 10 tap dance video. You can check it out in the link in the description. And really, if you just looked for that, what the fuck is wrong with you? Okay, number 10, we've got A River Runs Through It. Into the A category. So, I really loved this movie when I was young. I spent a lot of my youth fishing with family, so there's certainly nostalgia that I connect with this book. It's a delightful slice of Americana, and while the religious overtones don't resonate with me at all, the idea of fishing being the linchpin that keeps this dysfunctional family together is beautifully wrought, and the book really transports you. And isn't that what we want out of well written fiction? At numbers 8 and 9 are Bone of the Hills and Empire of Silver. Empire of Silver and Bones of the Hill. So it doesn't really matter, again, which order these are in, as I loved both of them. These are books 3 and 4 of Khan Igildin's Conqueror series, based on the life of Genghis Khan, Genghis Han, however you want to say his name, and the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan is on my short list of most fascinating humans to ever live, and Igildin's work on this series is excellent. To me, this is the pinnacle of the historical fiction genre. Each book reads like a script for a potential Hollywood blockbuster. The characters are fascinating, the story is full of action and intrigue, and Igildin just delivers it all so directly and effectively. The Mongols are kind of horrible people, and yet you find yourself rooting for them throughout these books. I don't think that's the easiest thing to do as an author, and Igildin certainly achieves it. These books get me so pumped up, and if you have any interest in that period of history, you need to read these books. At number 7 is Ask the Dust by John Fante. So this book has been listed as one of Bukowski's inspirations, and as an appreciator of Bukowski, I decided to check it out. Right away, you can see why Bukowski would link himself at the hip to this book, as the voice and style contains a lot of similarities to his writing. The characters are kind of hopeless, sometimes despicable, oftentimes bizarre. The story is small, just about a time and a place, and struggling to make any sense of it all. It can be grotesque at times and feel meandering or even pointless, but I can also sense a faint whiff of what Bukowski mentioned as magic when he read this book. It's bold, it takes chances, it's affecting, and I couldn't help but be really impressed. At number 6 is Bluebeard by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a mock autobiography of the artist Rabo Karabekian, one of Vonnegut's most beloved characters. All of the Vonnegut trademarks are here. The irreverent witticisms, the observation of pointless absurdities, the satirical humor. I just love it. I've reviewed this one on the channel as well, so check it out if you want to know more. But it's just a great book with a really beautiful ending as well. Okay, top 5 time. Moving into the S tier category. Should have trumpets or something. Number 5 is Lords of the Bow. And this would be the second book of Khan Igildin's Conqueror series. I would have put both books 1 and 2 in this tier category, but I did read book 1 in 2018. The first 2 books are just pitch perfect. While the first book dealt with his origin story and the events of his early life that shaped his future, the second book deals more with his battles to unite the tribes and begin the creation of the largest empire in human history. I was obsessed with this book while I was reading it. I even went so far as to cast a Hollywood whitewashed version starring Daniel Day-Lewis as Genghis, Tom Hardy as his brother Kassar, Oscar Isaacson as his brother Kashuin, and also supporting cast of Timothy Olyphant, Joaquin Phoenix, Mads Mikkelsen, Michael Shannon, and Elijah Wood. Oh yeah, this shit was a blockbuster white people cultural appropriation masterpiece that could have left Tom Cruise's The Last Samurai and Scarlett Johansson's Ghost in the Shell green with envy. At number 4 is True Grit by Charles Portis. The American West is another time period I'm fascinated by, and this book is such a classic. It's been made into a movie twice, both of which are excellent, so it shouldn't be any surprise that the source material is also delightful. The narrator is a young girl so full of spunk and chutzpah that you're just sort of left mesmerized by her storytelling. The language is so evocative and transportive, you're practically left coughing from the dust as you read. It's filled to the brim with chuckle-inducing colloquialisms. My mom always said 2 biscuits don't make a basket, which I totally made up but could absolutely fit in this book. And the final third is a tense and white knuckle ride to the finish, and you're just left out of breath upon completion and with the feeling that you've read a timeless classic. I actually really look forward to reading this book again, and I don't really read books two times that often. At number 3 is Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut. Maybe it's nostalgia again. Yes, I know there's a lot of Vonnegut on this list. This was the first book I ever read by Kurt Vonnegut. I was probably about 13 years old, and the juvenile parts, drawing pictures of buttholes, anybody, delighted my immature mind, while the critiques on American society, war, and the exploration into mental illness and free will just lit my young brain on fire. Yes, the narrative is far from perfect, and the second half of the book drags at times, but if I had to choose one book that most closely represents my own identity, humor, and thoughts about the world in general, this is it. At number 2, I have The Godfather. I'm gonna make him a book he can't refuse. That was bad. I probably should have practiced. I have a lengthy review of this book already on the channel as well, so don't forget to check that out if you want more details. I avoided reading this book for years because I'd seen the movie, and I just figured, what was the point? Both the book and the movie follow the same story, as they were both penned by Mario Puzo, and they're both masterpieces, and yet they each have their own identity. The movie is all class, it's elegant, it's serious, it's powerful. The book is much more pulpy, comical, and gratuitous. I didn't read the book because of that reputation, and I'm glad that I finally did check it out. Read the book. It's fantastic, and I absolutely love it. I feel like a mom with two beautiful boys. I love them both. Don't make me pick a favorite. At number 1 on the list for the 25 fiction books I read in 2019 is Saigon by Anthony Gray. I am a sucker for sweeping, grand, historical epics. Dr. Zhivago, Shogun. I mean, Shogun by James Clavell is arguably my favorite book of all time in the fiction genre, and this book scratches that itch. The book is ostensibly about Joseph Sherman and the 5 decades of his life that become inexorably linked with Vietnam. As in the best historical fiction, it's not entirely accurate, but contains enough history where you're likely to learn some things and broaden your perspective. And it also adds in those dramatic elements of love and loss and suffering that help make it compulsively readable. I often struggle with books nearing 1,000 pages in length, as I feel the subject matter isn't epic enough to justify the length. Well, this book is a bit over 800 pages, and I think it deserves every single page. I have seen it compared to War and Peace, and while I don't necessarily agree, I do think that comparison helps to explain the grand scale and also the high regard that people have for this book. Oh my God, we've done it. So that's it for now. I have pretty much ranked every single book I read in 2019. All I have left is 5 or 6 non-fiction books. I don't think that really merits its own tier maker video. So I'll probably be done making this style of video for maybe a year or so, back to the normal singular reviews. Anyway, I hope that from watching this video that you were at least able to maybe find a couple of books that pique your interest and that you can check those out for yourselves. And stay tuned for more book reviews here on Rants and Reviews.